Hey guys, this is going to be the video for quickly going through the psychological disorders Google slide. This would be what you would watch after you've taken all of the notes, and you can look at this screen, listen to me talk, and look at your notes and compare. Make sure you have everything down, make sure you've watched all the videos and all that good stuff. If you need to write something, just pause this, or if you need to go watch the videos, you can do so during this or after it. This is going to be a quick run through of the entire psychological disorders Google slide. This stuff we talked about before you left, it was just kind of some general statistics about mental illness and like a case study of a person talking about it. Talked about abnormal behavior and where you draw the line. It's kind of hard depending on the situation. And here are the sections that you did in your notes. So the first section was just an introduction in general. We watched a crash course in class before you left, and we went through most of this stuff. So we talked about a disorder being a syndrome, which means it's a collection of a bunch of different stuff together. We talked about this word clinically significant. The word clinically, talking about clinical like medical, basically. And you're going to have significant disturbances in your behavior, your cognition, your emotion. All those things are going to be drastically different than the you that you are. And also, it's got to be maladaptive. Maladaptive is a fancy word for harmful. And so we sometimes think if we're harming ourselves, you think of like physically harming yourselves, but you can emotionally harm yourself, socially harm yourself, like not going to work, not eating, not getting out of the bed, not maintaining relationships, friendships, a marriage, parenting. All those things are harming you. And they're also dysfunctional, which means, they are not helping you function, right? So they're like not normal and stuff. That's what makes it a psychological disorder and not just something else you're going through, like we talked about, maybe grief instead of like clinical depression. Some early roots and how they used to look at it hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and then how we started changing our mind. And so the first guy in France kind of throwing the balls and making people. I'm at school filming. You hear the bell ringing? Man, that's a long bell. So he was making these balls and inviting people and kind of making it destigmatized. Then we talked about how we moved to a medical model. So this is a medical condition. Psychological disorders are a medical condition. Most of them are caused by brain chemicals in your brain, right? Like the chemicals that we have that our brain produces. And so you can treat those with medicine and stuff, just like you could treat someone with high blood pressure. So you send them to a hospital and stuff like that. Talked about the biopsychosocial approach and how this kind of comes into play with everything we do. That we've talked about in this class. There's biological influences, psychological influences, and sociocultural influences. So biological is like your genes and your brain structure and your chemistry. Psychological is what's going on with you right now. Is it stress or trauma, stuff like that. And sociocultural is kind of your fancy word for environment. So it's looking at the environment you're in, your roles, your expectations, like what's going on in your life. And then we talked about the DSM-5. So it stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is a handbook used by people who treat psychological disorders, and it is full of information. So it tells you all about the disorder, how to treat it, how not to treat it, gives you some case studies about it, shows what's worked, what's not worked, from medicine all the way to, like some other types of therapies that we'll talk about later in the unit. And so you can watch a video on it. Roundabout where we stopped in class, depending on which class you're in. These are just some statistics about it. And then we started moving into our new section. So section 2 is about anxiety disorders, OCD, and PTSD. So there's 3 types of anxiety disorders: generalized anxiety, panic, and phobias. Anxiety, we talked about, is pretty much that feeling of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, that like building up, that tension, that can't breatheness, that all consuming of your thoughts, all that kind of stuff. And so it is a part of life, but when it does those things from the earlier slides, it's maladaptive. It's making your life dysfunctional. That's when it becomes a psychological disorder, and that's when someone would need treatment or help. So anxiety disorders, you got your definition right there. It's just a psychological disorder characterized by distressing, persistent anxiety or maladaptive behaviors that reduce the anxiety. And so this would be a behavior in which you hurt yourself. Again, you can think physically, but there's other things you can do that do harm yourself that aren't like physically cutting yourself or anything like that. So you got generalized anxiety disorder, an anxiety disorder in which a person is continually tense. Tense, you know what it means. Apprehensive is that like nervousness, in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal. So if you go back to unit 2, you remember autonomic nervous system arousal, that was the parasympathetic, sympathetic. And remember with your autonomic nervous system, that's what controlled those two. So if you're aroused, it's kind of like that sympathetic nervous system where you're like on. Remember we said like you would have sympathy on someone in a situation like this. Like your pupils are dilated, your stomach, your breathing, your heart rate is increased, all those things, your pancreas is secreting stuff. I mean, there's a ton of things going on in your body. And that's what makes you so, having all these feelings basically. It is kind of sometimes could be hard to identify this and figure out what it's like linked to. Like it would be easy to say, oh, when this happens, that's what it is. We'll just avoid that. But someone with true generalized anxiety, they just feel like this. There's not always the same trigger. It just could come on them at any given time. And so the symptoms are like excessive and uncontrollable worry. They can be jittery, agitated, sleep deprived, hard to concentrate because they're always worrying. And they could even suffer from depression. And it lasts for a while too. And so these are kind of the things that are going on that makes the person realize, you can't live like this. Then you have panic disorder. More bells for us. And so this is when you have kind of those things we're talking about, but it's more of a panic attack. So it's accompanied with chest pain, a choking sensation, frightening sensation, worry over having another one. Honestly, these people believe themselves to be having a heart attack. And if you looked at their vitals, you would probably say, looking at, their perspiration, their heart rate, their breathing, their this, their that, you would say, oh, these, could be indicative of something medically going on with your body. But it's not because anything medically is happening to their body. It's because their brain made that happen for whatever reason. And so they can't control it. They can't just like slow down their breathing. They can't slow down their heart rate. And so they have these feelings, but there's nothing medically. You can't like fix it because there's nothing wrong with their heart. They could be dizzy, they could pass out, trembling, shaking. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And again, it could be triggered by one thing, but a lot of times it's not, because if it was, people would just avoid that one thing and life would be super easy. But panic attacks can come out of nowhere for people. Then we start talking, next is phobias. So these are the ones talking about persistent, irrational fear. And avoidance of anything surrounding that fear. So a lot of us have fears. A lot of us even call them phobias. But remember, it's not a phobia because it doesn't impact our life. Like if we couldn't go to work, we couldn't do things because this fear was so big, then perhaps it'd be a phobia that we would need treated. But right now we're probably just all scared of stuff and things. But there are people who legit don't leave their house. That's maladaptive behavior. That's harming yourself because of their fear. And again, there's videos for all these. And there's a chart talking about various fears and phobias. And then you got OCD. So OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. It's a disorder characterized by unwanted repetitive thoughts, which are the obsessions, and actions, which are the compulsions. And most people actually have both. We all have OCD tendencies. I know I told you guys at the beginning of the unit talking about how I say like, oh, I'm OCD because I check things before I leave the house. But I don't truly have OCD because I can actually leave the house. I can leave the house without having this anxiety, this apprehension, all this stuff. If I couldn't leave my house and I had those feelings, I couldn't live a day-to-day life, that really would be OCD that would need treatment. So like I said, it's two parts. The obsessions are the thoughts. So for instance, people are really obsessed with cleanliness and germs. And someone who's truly OCD right now, all this coronavirus stuff, probably cranking that up a lot. So they have these thoughts, I'm dirty, I'm going to get sick, over and over, and they can't get these thoughts out of their head. They can't even think of anything else because it's almost like a voice in their head, just like on a repeat record. And so then they do a compulsion to make the voice go away. So if you were thinking something over and over, you would do something to get rid of it. If you're like, oh, my leg really itches, it itches, it itches, it itches, you would do a behavior to get rid of that itch, aka you would scratch it. So compulsions are like the scratch, right? So this is the behavior they do. They go back and check things. They go wash their hands again. They go scrub things again. And it's like as soon as they quit doing the behavior, the thoughts come back. And the thoughts are so consuming that if they don't go back and do the behavior again, then it's like it's cyclical, right? And so that's why they can't ever leave the house or go out with their friends or stuff like that. They know it's irrational. I mean, these people don't live in an altered reality. They know they should be able to wash their hands and walk out of the house, but they just can't. Their brain doesn't work that way. It's like it doesn't shut off, that type of thing. And the Howie Mandel video is a really good video to check out because he's a celebrity with OCD. And just some more stats on common components of OCD. Then you got PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's a disorder characterized by haunting memories, nightmares, hypervigilance. That's where you're like super aware and can't like relax. social withdrawal, jumpy anxiety, numbness of a feeling, and or insomnia. So it could be any combination of all these things going on, and it usually lingers for a while, around 4 weeks or more. We really think about it a lot when we think about military people because of the reality that they live in. Like, none of us can wrap our head around it. You know, we go to bed at night, we don't worry that there's going to be an explosion or that we're going to die or something. So they don't, right? And every minute they think someone could jump up from behind them and take their life. So they're way more hypervigilant than you and I could even imagine. And those feelings don't go away. You don't live like that for years and just come back to, you know, normal civilian life and just be fine. So they suffer from PTSD a lot, unfortunately. And usually the higher the distress, the situation they were in, the more likely they are to develop PTSD. But you can get it from other things in life. People who are abused, trauma, or just kind of other random things that might not sound that bad could trigger this in someone. Then the next set are depressive disorders and bipolar disorder. So these are your mood disorders. Depression is low, and there's something called mania that's high, and bipolar is a mixture of depression and mania. So make sure you watch the crash course about this. So depression is basically, you know, we talked about this at the beginning of the unit. Where's the line in the sand between like sadness and depression, grief and depression, you know, that kind of thing. Like, all our emotions are on a continuum, and you just have to know yourself and the situation to know, like, is this right? Is this normal? Like, do I need help type thing? So depression, as we call it, technically is called major depressive disorder. A person experiences, and there can't be any reason for this, no medical condition, no drug use, nothing like this. They're going to have 2 or more weeks with 5 or more of the following symptoms, and one of which must either be a depressed mood, that has to be one of the 5 that you're going to see, or loss of interest or pleasure. And so these are things they could suffer from. Changes in appetite or weight, one way or another, up or down, changes in sleep, one way or another, less or more, physical agitation, lethargy, that's, you know, a fancy word for lazy, less energy, feeling worthless, unwarranted guilt, just like feeling so bad about things but not really having a reason, thoughts of death, suicide, probably even self-harming, problems thinking, concentrating, making decisions, like they can't even, you know, think and concentrate. And it is the most common psychological disorder. There's versions that are more severe. There's versions that, you know, just seasonal, come during types of the year with the weather and stuff, all kinds of things. Bipolar, like I said, is when a person fluctuates between depression and mania. So, and this isn't from moment to moment. You know, you'll see somebody and they were happy and then they're all like in a bad mood and you're like, man, you're so bipolar. Well, that's not really bipolar. The person's moody, you know, or going through stuff, but they're not really suffering from bipolar. Bipolar, the change is over weeks, stuff like that. And you gradually notice the change. It's almost so slow at first, you don't even notice it until a week's gone by and you're like, whoa, we're totally off from where we were. So the depressive state that you saw on the slide before, and then the manic state, little sleep, increased sex drive, quick stream of thoughts, fast speech patterns, poor judgment, risk taking. Sometimes it's hard to understand someone in a manic phase. They talk so fast, they don't make sense. They're doing things that you're like, whoa, 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 not a good idea. They have that poor judgment. They're crazy risky, from racking up debts and credit cards, jumping out of airplanes, driving, you know, 120 miles an hour down the highway. Just, it could be whatever. And so we've seen scans of people's brains. And so a normal person's brain would look like this. Someone with bipolar, when they're in a manic state, you can see all the brain activity that's going on. So it's just like they're being flooded with brain activity that they don't even sense or live in reality. And so there's a good bipolar video with Demi Lovato. You guys probably know about her, so you should check that one out. Then you got schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is its own beast. And so make sure you watch the crash course on that. Schizophrenia literally translates to mean split mind. That's where the word comes from. So this person is split from reality. So it's a disorder characterized by delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, diminished or inappropriate emotional expressions. So you'll see on the next slide, delusions, that's when you are believing something that's not real. Hallucinations, having a sensory input that's not real. You know what it means to be disorganized. And then emotion or inappropriate emotional responses is like they laugh at the wrong time, cry at the wrong time, just things that you and I would look at each other and be like, how in the world is someone reacting like that? You know, so weird and not norm. Make sure you watch all the schizophrenia videos because they are interesting. This is a picture, this is a self-portrait of Van Gogh. He is believed to have suffered from schizophrenia. But as you'll note, there are, you know, with some of these things, it's like with everything in life, really. I mean, there can be good sides to them too, right? So like that, he says that's why his art was so amazing because his brain was split from reality. And we'll watch a movie if we come back. If not, I'll try and get it to you guys so you can see it. It's really good. A Beautiful Mind, where a guy is a brilliant mathematician, and it is because of his schizophrenia. So the delusions, the false beliefs, like an example, you believe you can fly, right? You go jump off a building, and people do that. I mean, schizophrenia actually has the highest death rate associated with it. Bipolar has one of the highest suicide rates, but schizophrenics don't always take their own life. They do things that are not in reality because they're so broken from reality that things end up killing them. So they'll do things like believe they can fly, they believe they're being persecuted, shootings, stuff like that. Hallucinations are having a false sensory perception. So you think you see something, but it's not really there. That's a sensory input through vision. You hear something, and the hallmark for them is like hearing voices in their head. So you hear people talking, but there's nobody there talking. Feelings. Now, this one's what creeps me out. They'll say they'll feel things on them, like you're covered in spiders or pin pricks or something like that, but like nothing's touching your skin. They can also taste or smell something not there. That's the skin too, but it's not really as common. And so that's where you can see that the problem is in their mind. And so, like, there's an example about hearing voices, seeing people, that thing. Other symptoms, disorganized speech. A lot of times they speak quickly as well, but when they speak quickly, it's like it's words, it's real words and they're real language, but they're not put together in any logical sense. So, like, I could try and do an example, but I can't even think about it because the way we talk flows logically. So, if you just said words, you would have to like pause and it would take you forever to do it, but they just go like, brrr, they just like spit it out. Crazy. It's called word salad. You can watch a video and see it. Inappropriate emotions, like I said, laughing or crying when it's not the right time, suddenly getting angry, or they lack emotions. There's this thing called catatonia for schizophrenics. You could be a catatonic schizophrenic, and they literally like freeze. They tense up. Like if you could imagine, I know I'm not in front of you doing it, so you'd have to take your arm and like just take your arm out and like kind of flex your arm like you're flexing your muscles, and it's just so tense that if you could imagine me like hitting your arm right now, it's gonna like stay in the same place. And maybe you have your fist balled up, and if I was knocking it, it's like not moving, staying in the same place. It's like their whole body does that, like goes tense, and they'll like freeze like a statue. And again, like if you went up to them and you were like poking at them, like they're not gonna move. They're not gonna be like flowing in the wind or anything. It's really weird how their body tenses up. And they have disruptive motor movements. Oh, that's where it's at. Huh. And so there's a catatonia video stuff. So you can look at some catatonic schizophrenics, which is interesting. It is a psychotic disorder. A psychotic disorder means you have irrational ideas, a distorted perception, and you've lost contact with reality. That's why it's kind of one of the more scarier ones. There's video there. I'm going to need to go put a video in there. Don't know what that meant. Lost contact with reality, like believing you can fly, like crazy stuff, like scary stuff, to be honest, too. So a lot of times these are people who do crimes and stuff. They hurt people because they believe that they are, you know, Jesus who's come back and been told that they need to murder these people or something. I mean, they are not in reality. It can be very scary if left untreated. And it disrupts all parts of their life, their family. I mean, you can imagine, like, this person's not in reality. So, like, the life of people around them is just so, like, disturbed and stuff, too. But they believe it to be real. As real right now as there are no voices in your head, and I was like, "Listen to this," and you're like, "No, Miss Parnell, you're crazy. There's nobody saying that," right? As real as that is to you, that's how real it is to them that they're hearing something. So you can try and tell a schizophrenic, "No one's there. No, no one talking to you," but they're not gonna believe you because they are in their reality. It's not our reality, it's not the real reality, but, like, you're not gonna be able to convince them. So that's the hard thing with this is, like, you can't convince them to take medicine. Just like you couldn't convince me right now to take medicine to start hearing voices because there are none, because that's not real. Telling them to take medicine because you hear voices in your head, they're not gonna wanna get rid of those voices because that is real. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you are not. You're the crazy one to them. It's so strong. So this one is a really hard one. Then you got dissociative personality and eating disorders. You got 2 crash courses. Make sure you watch those because even though your book kind of puts all these together, they're very, very, very different disorders. I think they should all 3 be their own thing. It's kind of weird that they put them together. So dissociative disorders, if you associate with something, you go together. So if you disassociate, you're apart. So these are the 2 basically which are pulling you apart, if you want to think about it like that. There's fugue and DID. DID stands for dissociative identity disorder, which is what we used to call multiple personality disorder. So these are controversial because a lot of times people don't think they're real. Like, what do you mean you're like 4 different people? You're just acting or you're just seeking attention or something. That's what people might say. They're controversial. They're rare, thankfully, in which someone's conscious awareness becomes separated, aka dissociated, from anything about their life, their previous memories, their thoughts, their feelings, that we've all been like felt like dissociation from time to time, like you're watching yourself, like what's going on, this feels unreal. But someone with this psychological disorder lives like that, which is pretty kind of crazy. A lot of times this develops from trauma. Maybe the person tried to dissociate themselves, pull themselves out of the trauma so they didn't feel like it was them that was being abused or something. And these can set off. Usually all of these dissociatives go back to some type of trauma abuse. So fugue is a sudden loss of memory or change in identity, is often in response to an overwhelmingly stressful situation. AKA you forget your life. You really do. Someone with fugue really forgets their life. You can be found later in a new city with a new name, new job. You remember nothing of your old life, where you came from, what your name is, your old family, your old friends, what you used to do. And so that's why a lot of people look at this like, give me a break. Like, you don't remember anything. You're a 45-year-old man. You have no idea that you're married and this is what you do and you have these kids. It just seems too weird, right? But there's some videos. Oh man, did I do this here too? I'm gonna have to go find those videos. Hopefully, maybe by the time you took it, those videos were there and you're looking at me going, what are you doing, Miss Parnell? So I will put videos in because I have a good one on fugue from a news story. Dissociative identity disorder is DID is a rare disorder in which a person exhibits 2 or more distinct and alternating personalities. And like I said, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. So each personality controls a person's behavior at that time. And you're only going to see one personality at once. But the thing is, like, is somebody truly with this? It's not like they're pretending. Like, each personality has its own voice. Like, even more than that, like sound, inflection, like just everything. It's not just like they change their voice like me or you trying to do an accent or something. Like, they really, everything about that changes, which is pretty crazy. Their mannerisms, the way they act. I have a video. Let me see. Okay. I'll put it in and maybe like it says video. I just must not put these videos in. I'll put a video, 2 videos in. It's a 2-part series of a football player with it, and it's really interesting to see. So he's African American. He's actually a pretty famous one from like the 90s, I think. I'm not up on football, so I don't know. But it's a really good video. And like even his ex-wife's talking about how he had it. And she does nothing to protect him over or be nice to him because he was terrible to her, I think, because of his multiple personality. But one of the most interesting parts is doctors talking about it. And like when he switched into a different personality, he kept running his hands, like running his fingers and stuff through his hair, like a white person with long hair would, which you'll see him in the video, like it wouldn't be possible with his hair. So it's like everything, the person's like countenance changes, like the way they sit, talk, like you just think of all the differences you could be and all that changes. So that's what's really, like mind blowing about this. And the other personalities are unaware of each other. Then there's personality disorders. There's borderline personality, narcissistic personality, and antisocial personality. So these are right here. If you want to think about your quote unquote crazy, if you had to describe someone as crazy, or you thought we were going to talk about crazy in this unit, this is probably where it's housed. So narcissistic is going to be kind of all about the person. Borderline will be the first one we see in which the person's just crazy. And antisocial is kind of the scary one because that's like, serial killers and stuff like that. These are inflexible and enduring behavior patterns. This one is, you can pretty much treat the other ones. Even multiple personality with therapy and stuff, you can treat them. If you can get a schizophrenic to take their medicine and get them back into reality, you can treat them. But like with a personality, you can't treat that. You can't fix someone's personality. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no medicine to make you a good person if you're not. There's no way. And you probably know you're not. And to be honest, if you do, then you don't care that you're not. You don't care to fix it because you don't care that you're not a good person because it's your personality. So this one, the thing about this one is there's really not going to be any treatment options. I mean, people try, but they're not like successful. So I'll have videos on that. So like I said, borderline, this is your crazy person. Unstable emotions, distorted sense of reality, manipulative, deceptive, sabotages relationships with other people. I mean, how are you going to treat this, right? Like they sit there and talk to the therapist and then they leave out and they're crying to someone on the phone saying, the therapist did this to me and attacked me and da-da-da. You can't fix that because the person knows what they're doing. They're manipulating right now. They're lying. They're being deceptive. They're trying to sabotage any help you get. This is kind of unfixable. And this is the one you think about, yeah, if a person was really like this, I mean, they would really just be crazy, right? So how do you do that? You kind of just have to figure out ways to deal with it and live with it because you're probably not going to get narcissistic is not just like, oh, I'm full of myself. It is the person is so full of themselves, they cannot get outside of their box, out of their head, they can't even see things from the opposite perspective or point of view or anything. So they're so self-focused, so self-inflating. They exaggerate their importance. They require constant attention and they lack empathy for others. That's what I'm saying. They really can't see things from another perspective or another side. Can't empathize with anyone. Again, it's going to be hard to treat because they're not going to see the problem with it because they're so in their box. They're not seeing how this is impacting other people. So they don't see it as a problem that needs to be fixed, basically. And then you have antisocial personality. So this is your scary one. All right? This is your personality disorder in which a person exhibits a lack of a conscience. So they know they shouldn't kill people. They know it's not right to kill people. But like if you and I killed someone, I'd like to say we'd feel really, really bad about it. It'd bother us at night. We'd be like, oh, I got to tell someone. I got to turn myself in. I can't sleep at night. I keep thinking about it. They're not going to be like that. They're like, yeah, I'm probably not supposed to kill people. I know they say that, but I enjoy it, or I don't care, or I don't feel bad. I mean, it's scary, like how cold this person is. Or if it's other types of wrongdoing, stealing, serial rapist. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Toward friends, toward families, toward strangers on the street. It doesn't matter. But see, they're usually pretty clever about it because they know they're not supposed to be doing it, but they want to do it. So they can be ruthless and aggressive, but they're also usually a really good con artist who like fake you and stuff. Like I said, no remorse. We call these people psychopaths or sociopaths. So when you see the word antisocial, I know sometimes we're pretty quick to say like, oh, so-and-so's antisocial because they don't talk. They don't have a lot of friends because you see the word anti, which means not, social means like out socializing. So you're like, they're not socializing. Yeah, I can see where, we make that connection, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is not a quiet person. So if you were to call someone in, out for being this antisocial, this isn't just like you're odd and you're quiet. This is like you don't have a conscience. Show a lower emotional intelligence. A lot of times they can be impulsive. Like they don't think about it. They just do it. And they're not scared of getting caught. They're not scared of the person coming back on them. They're not scared of anything. Like, you or I at least have emotions of fear if we were going through something crazy like this too, but we're not, which is really wild. I'll have a video of that. And then we have eating disorders. So there's anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating. So basically our bodies are pretty much supposed to maintain a pretty steady weight. It's like this range we have, this set point. And we'll actually talk about that more in the motivation unit too, but coming up. But we have this weight range, not an exact number, and our body's pretty healthy and kind of on the norm stays in that range. You kind of have to work to get it out of that range, higher or lower. But people do. So basically with anorexia, it's when a person doesn't eat and they lose a considerable amount of weight. But again, most of the time, it's not going to be about food for them. It's about a control issue. Like they can control what they put in their body. They can control how their body looks. When a lot of things in life could be going around the person that they cannot control, and they don't like that. So they take the one thing they can control pretty much, which, and that would be a lot of times could lead to anorexia. And so over about 15% of their body weight goes down in anorexia. They lose that much. And I'll have a video. I have videos here with these, but bulimia is when a person eats but then tries to get rid of the food. So that's the binge and purge. So the binge is eating all the food in, purge is getting rid of it. The most common thing I think we probably think about with bulimia is someone vomiting, making themselves throw up. But, there's other pathways out of your body. So you could use laxative use and, go to the bathroom. Sometimes people will fast afterwards. They'll eat really bad and then they won't eat for an extended period of time. Or they'll try and like over exercise to like burn it off. So some way they're trying to get rid of it or something. This one doesn't usually lead to a lot of weight loss, but it can really lead to a deterioration in your body. I mean, your body is not made to throw up like that, get sick the other way in the bathroom like that, fast and go through periods of time without food. I mean, that's just not how our body's set up. So you can really damage like the internal structures of your body by basically overloading it with too much stuff that's too bad, too fast, and then not having anything at all. And then binge eating disorder is when a person binge eats. And again, it's kind of similar. It can be followed by more psychological stuff, so distress, disgust with themselves, guilt, just feeling terrible, but they're not really doing the behavior like a bulimic. They might overeat and then they just feel terrible about it and can't go on, with normal life and stuff, but they're not making themselves get sick or anything like that. So that's a little. And that is it. Woohoo! That was your quick review through the psychological disorders. I will put the videos in. You've probably already seen them by now, unless you're watching it right after I film this and upload it online. And I hope that helps.